Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something that really touches everyone, whether you're making stuff, consuming stuff, or just, scrolling. We're talking about creativity,
Yeah.
especially now when it feels like there's just infinite content out there. We've pulled together insights from, well, quite a few sources asking some big questions like, is there actually a limit to what humans can create? Are we going to run out of new songs, new stories? And what happens when art just starts to feel kind of stale?
Yeah, and our mission today really is to explore that tension. Abundance versus scarcity in creation. We'll try to dissect what makes art feel good or maybe bad, even though we say it's subjective. And we'll grapple with how modern consumption, feeds, algorithms, impacts creators, and frankly, impacts all of us, our collective soul maybe. We're even going to tackle this idea of brain rot content, ask some pretty profound questions about what art is even for. Okay, so let's dive right in. The big one first. Is there a ceiling? A limit to human creation? Because it really feels like there should be one, doesn't it? I mean, think about music. Western music, you've got 12 notes. And English alphabet, just 26 letters? Seems finite.
It does seem finite. And
Yeah.
it's not just notes and letters. You've got story archetypes, genres, common themes. We see them again and again. But what's really fascinating here, and several sources, particularly from linguistics and math, point this out, is that these limits are actually combinatorially abundant.
Combinatorially abundant. Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
It basically means the number of ways you can combine those limited pieces is, well, it's astronomical, mind-bogglingly huge.
Right. I saw some examples in the research that just blew my mind, like with a simple 5 by 5 grid of letters. Using the English alphabet, there are over 82 quintillion possible grids. That's 82 with, what, 18 zeros?
Exactly. It's a staggering number. In music, too. Even just sticking to, say, 8-note melodies. The number of possibilities is already huge, but then you add rhythm, tempo, harmony, lyrics. It shoots up into the hundreds of millions, easily, maybe billions.
Precisely. So the big takeaway, the core idea from the research, is that having finite building blocks doesn't mean finite creations. It's very much like DNA, a really small alphabet of base pairs.
Right, just 4 letters.
Yeah, 4 letters. But the sequences, the structures, the context that generates basically infinite variety in life. Same principle.
Okay, that makes sense. Infinite potential, finite blocks. But then, why the constant feeling that it's all been done before? Where does that come from?
Ah, that's a common feeling. A few psychological studies we looked at call this scarcity framing. It seems to pop up for a few reasons. One is just exposure bias. The more stuff we see or hear, the more we notice patterns repeating. Makes everything feel familiar, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Then there's, let's call it capitalist filtering. We mostly see what gets promoted, what sells, not the, vast ocean of stuff actually being made.
Yeah.
So the popular tropes just keep surfacing.
Like the same movie plots over and over.
Exactly. And lastly, there's this huge pressure on creators now to be novel, completely original, even though historically many art forms like myths or folk songs are naturally iterative. They build on what came before. And if you really connect this to the bigger picture, scarcity framing suggests this zero-sum game. If someone else did it, then I can't. It closes the doors.
Okay, but the counter to that is abundance framing, right? That perspective says, okay, maybe the form repeats, but the context is always new. Like you were saying, a heartbreak song from, say, 1965 feels totally different than one made today. Different voice, different tech, different world.
Absolutely. The context is everything. It's not just about the originality of the structure like the notes or the plot points. It's fundamentally about the authenticity of presence. You're creating an experience, and every experience is unique to its moment, its creator, its audience. Those same notes, they land differently now.
That's interesting. But one source brought up a kind of internal limit. It said, okay, the universe of creation might be abundant, but our ability to perceive novelty, that can become scarce, because our brains love patterns, and we get burnout. Information overload.
That's a very important distinction.
So maybe the solution isn't just making more stuff, but engaging with it differently. Slower, maybe. Deeper, more personally.
That's one perspective. And there's a scientific angle, too, related to entropy in information systems. One source really dug into this. Think of it like this. In any huge system, true randomness or radical originality actually becomes harder to distinguish over time.
Yeah.
Statistically, you get more redundancy, more compression.
Like how TikTok sounds get reused constantly.
Exactly. Or book plots follow templates. Or AI trains on past data to create something it calls new, but it's essentially remixing.
Right. It's synthesizing, not originating in the human sense.
Which leads to a critical question. Are we creating with genuine intention? Or are we just generating output, filling space?
So it sounds like the overall idea is creation isn't like a mine you deplete. It's more like a language you speak or a river you tap into. It's fundamentally about connection to others, to yourself, maybe even to something mysterious, an infinite human impulse, not a finite resource. Okay, that naturally leads us to the next big question. Creative staleness. If art is subjective, why does some of it just feel objectively flat or dead or bad?
Yeah, it's a feeling we all recognize. And the sources suggest that stale creativity isn't always about simple repetition. It's often about disconnection. Art can feel stagnant when it's, say, formulaic, but without any friction. It relies too heavily on templates, predictable chord changes, recycled plots, AI filler without any risk or surprise or vulnerability.
Like it's made by a machine, even if a human made it.
Precisely. It feels assembled, not truly born. It also feels stagnant when it lacks real emotional or thematic tension, you know? Great art often wrestles with difficult questions, leaves things open. Stale art tends to give easy answers or just flattens the complexity. Another sign is mimicking the form but missing the essence. Like a pop song with the perfect beat and structure, but absolutely no soul behind it. It's imitation, but no transformation.
You can feel the difference.
You really can. And finally, staleness often comes when the priority is just output over presence. When it's optimized purely for speed or SEO or chasing trends or making money, that vital spark just tends to disappear. It becomes a product, not a living process.
That totally resonates. We've all seen that, felt that. But it still brings up that paradox. If art is subjective, how can we possibly feel something is good or bad? Isn't that a flat-out contradiction?
It feels like one, but it isn't, really. Subjectivity doesn't equal relativism. Saying art is subjective means, yes, your interpretation is personal, the meaning you find can vary wildly. But that doesn't mean there are no shared standards. Humans, we're pattern-seeking creatures. We're emotionally attuned. Cultures naturally develop shared aesthetic values. Things like coherence, does this piece actually hold together? Resonance, does it move me? Does it connect? Craft, is it skillfully made, technically sound? Surprise, does it offer a fresh perspective? And depth, does it reward thinking about it later?
So our personal taste is one thing, but there are these underlying qualities we often respond to collectively.
Kind of, yeah. Aesthetic judgment isn't random, even if taste is personal. It draws on these shared cognitive and emotional responses.
Okay, so using those kinds of lenses, craft, resonance, etc., what makes something lean towards good or bad creatively?
Well, we can break it down. First, craft. Mastery of the medium.
Yeah.
Is it well put together? Bad art often fails right here. Not because the idea is bad, but the execution is clumsy. Terrible sound mixing, clunky dialogue, pacing that drags.
Technical stuff matters.
It does. Second, originality. Is there a unique voice, a distinct perspective? Even if it's working within a known form, does it have the creator's fingerprints on it? Derivative art feels like a copy. Good art feels like it has its own scars, its own soul.
Makes sense.
Third, intention. Does it feel like the piece is trying to say something or do something on purpose? Even really absurd or chaotic art usually benefits from having a clear why behind it, not just being random noise.
A sense of purpose.
Exactly. And fourth, resonance. Does it connect? Does it feel honest? Alive? Good art doesn't have to be slick or polished, but it generally needs to feel true in some way. And here's a really crucial point that came up repeatedly. Just because you can combine notes or words in billions of ways doesn't mean most combinations are meaningful.
Right, like random letters don't make a novel.
Exactly. Think of Lego bricks. Infinite possibilities, but most random clicks won't make anything interesting. Or DNA mutations, most are useless or harmful. Very few actually drive evolution forward. Creativity needs constraint to give it shape. It needs intention to give direction. And it needs curation selection, refinement, to sift the meaningful from the random noise. Abundance is potential, but discernment brings it to life.
That's a fantastic distinction. But what about bad art that's actually good? Campy movies or outsider art or punk rock, even some memes. Sometimes the badness is the point, right?
Absolutely. That's a great counterpoint. Sometimes technical badness or breaking conventions is the source of its power, its humor, its critique, or its charm. It complicates the neat categories.
Okay, this whole tension around good and bad art, it really leads us to what feels like a core problem today. The clash between art as expression and art as a product. Let's unpack this. We as consumers say we want great, risky art, but risk means failure, and artists often fail, but then algorithms often reward the safe, formulaic stuff.
That's the spiritual dissonance right there. Does all art have to be good? In a purely expressive sense, no. But we act like it must be. Why? I think it's because we confuse art with content and expression with commerce. Art, at its root, is about finding truth, exploring, being vulnerable. But the moment it hits Spotify or TikTok or a gallery wall, it enters the attention economy. It's judged by likes, shares, views, algorithmic favor, not just honesty.
So even messy, exploratory art gets pressured to be the best to justify its existence online.
Pretty much. And that pressure often comes from this deep-seated scarcity mindset.
Scarcity? How so?
Modern culture treats attention as the ultimate finite resource. The feeds are endless, but our focus isn't. So visibility becomes incredibly valuable, a commodity.
And in that context, bad art feels like waste. Like it's taking up precious attention space that something better could have used.
That's the feeling, yeah. It feels inefficient. It clogs the system. But is that really true? Does art take up space or does it create space?
Interesting way to put it.
The fear of bad art. Maybe it's really a fear of being overwhelmed, of irrelevance, of meaning getting lost in the flood. It says more about us and our anxieties as consumers than about the art itself. The idea that there's too much art. That implies our capacity to appreciate is the scarce resource.
So what does this pressure cooker environment do to the actual human artist? You hear that phrase all the time. You're only as good as your last project. It feels brutal.
It is brutal, and it leads to things like perfectionism paralysis. You're too afraid to release anything unless it's guaranteed to succeed.
Or imposter syndrome, always feeling like you have to prove yourself again.
Definitely. And burnout, because the system rewards speed, consistency, trend chasing, not necessarily depth or reflection or taking your time. Artists end up feeling like brands they have to perform constantly.
It's like applying market logic to the soul, measuring something intrinsic with extrinsic numbers.
And algorithms often amplify this. They tend to favor familiar patterns, easily digestible stuff, catchy titles, short formats. It encourages what some researchers call predictive creativity.
Predictive creativity.
Yeah, basically making art by trying to predict what the algorithm wants. Reverse engineering success, asking what will get clicks instead of what do I need to express.
Which leads to more formulaic stuff. Imitation.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's a human doing it or an AI. The risk is flattening creativity into just consumption fuel. Stuff for the feed, not food for the soul.
So we're stuck in this paradox. We want great, risky art. Great art involves failure. But the system audiences, platforms, often punishes failure. It feels like a lose-lose.
It is a lose-lose unless we shift our perspective. Maybe the countercultural move is to say, not all art has to be commercially good.
Right.
But all honest art has value. Some art is just practice. Some is catharsis. Some is just a stepping stone. Maybe it's only meant for 10 people or one.
Right.
In a healthier creative ecosystem, failure wouldn't be the end. It would just be part of the process. Art could be temporary, imperfect, niche, and still totally worthy. The artist isn't a brand. Their value isn't their view count.
That reframes bad art entirely. It's not the art that's the problem, necessarily. It's the system we use to measure it, compare it, commodify it. That's what triggers the anxiety. Okay, let's try another angle. This idea of abundance. Think about walking into a massive grocery store. Endless aisles, shelves stacked high with content. It sounds great, but honestly, it often leads to choice fatigue, risk aversion, sometimes just paralysis. You scroll Netflix for 30 minutes and pick nothing.
That grocery store analogy is perfect. It captures the paradox beautifully. This overwhelming abundance doesn't always lead to wonder and discovery. Ironically, it can breed inaction, distrust, and just plain exhaustion.
Yeah. And then there's the packaging problem. When you're overwhelmed, what do? You grab something familiar or something with flashy packaging. In content terms, that's the brand, the hype, the thumbnail, the genre tag. These surface signals become shortcuts.
Which means mediocre stuff with great marketing can easily beat amazing stuff with poor packaging. Art becomes about optimizing the signals, not necessarily the substance, like picking wine just based on the label design.
We've all done that. And probably regretted it.
Probably. And this abundance, it tends to make us conservative, not curious. When we're overwhelmed, we stick to what we know. Comfort shows, familiar artists, playlists we trust.
Because disappointment feels too costly. Not just money, but our time, our emotional energy.
Exactly. And that kills discovery. Not because there's nothing good out there, but because we're too tired or too wary to look for it.
And it makes me think about all the invisible waste, like food waste that goes to landfills. Most creative work just disappears. Most YouTube videos get hardly any views. Most books sell very few copies. Incredible work can just vanish without a trace.
That's right. We only see the bestsellers, the stuff promoted on the front page, the algorithmic winners. It creates this illusion that we're only seeing the best, when actually the vast majority is unseen, unheard.
What's the psychological cost of that for creators and consumers?
Well, when everything feels abundant, everything can start to feel cheap, disposable. Songs get skipped instantly. Posts are forgotten in seconds. Videos blur into the feed. For creators, it means your work might vanish immediately unless it hits big. There's no time to build slowly, to find an audience gradually. Even work you poured your soul into can be treated like just another disposable product.
Which leads to that demoralizing question, why even bother trying?
That's the spiritual wound, isn't it? Abundance without reverence. When something is infinitely available, it can lose its perceived value, its specialness, and that hurts the creative spirit deeply.
So how do we counteract that? How do we reframe maybe
The kind of
conscious consumption, sacred creation?
I think that's part of it. As consumers, maybe choosing more slowly, treating discovery like tasting, not just binging, supporting smaller creators, maybe not just with a click, but with actual attention, revisiting things.
And as creators?
Maybe accepting that invisibility isn't always failure. Sometimes it's freedom. Creating for depth, even if the reach is small. Maybe those 10 people who get it are enough. Savoring the act of making, not just chasing the outcome.
Right.
What's fascinating here, maybe the most radical thing you can do in a world drowning in choice, is just to care deeply, to make something slowly, with attention, to listen all the way through, to return to a piece of art, to treat it like a relationship, a moment, a gift, not just another item on the shelf.
Okay, caring deeply. I like that. But let's push into something potentially uncomfortable. What if a lot of this abundant content isn't even really art anymore? What if it's just brain rot?
Brain rot. Yeah, it's a harsh term, but it captures a feeling, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's that content that feels maybe addictive, but leaves you feeling empty. It's often low effort, super repetitive, maybe heavily optimized for algorithms. It prioritizes quick dopamine hits over any real meaning or reflection. It can leave you feeling kind of numb or even agitated afterwards.
Like mental junk food.
Exactly like junk food for the mind. Taste okay going down, easy to consume, instantly gratifying, but ultimately, no real nourishment. Some neurological perspectives suggest it's designed to bypass your critical thinking. Just keep you hooked, keep you scrolling.
Can you give some specific examples? What does this stuff look like?
Sure. And, context matters. Not all of these are inherently evil, but they contribute to the feeling of rot when they dominate. Think about those endless reaction chains. Someone reacts to a reaction to a reaction. Very little new value, just feeding the engagement loop.
Right.
Or those hyper-edited, super-fast shorts. Flash cuts, robotic AI voiceovers, maybe that random gameplay footage like Subway Surfers in the corner. It's pure stimulus overload, designed to hijack attention, not communicate anything.
Yeah, those are intense.
Then there's low-effort opinion farming, just throwing out hot takes to bait arguments in the comments without any real substance or nuance.
Ray J bait.
Pretty much. Or just endlessly recycled formats, trends, memes, dances done to death with no new twist. And definitely the rise of purely AI-generated content sludge. Mass-produced stuff just to game search engines or fill quotas, often totally incoherent or just soulless.
What's the impact on us as consumers and on the people making it?
For consumers, it can shorten attention spans, absolutely.
Right.
Train our brains to crave constant, shallow novelty. Feed scroll addiction, always looking for the next hit, never satisfied. It can lead to feeling mentally foggy, emotionally numb. And it might even undermine our ability to appreciate slower, deeper, more challenging art when we encounter it.
And for creators.
It incentivizes churning stuff out over crafting something meaningful. It subtly trains creators to make what performs algorithmically, not necessarily what matters to them. Leads to burnout, feeling disconnected, cynical mimicry instead of authentic expression. And here's a painful truth we might need to face. Not all creation is art. Not all content is nourishment. Not all output actually deserves our reverence. If something's made with zero intention, shared anonymously or without care, consumed passively, maybe it's not feeding the soul. Maybe it's actually extracting something from it.
That's a heavy thought. Like when the world is full of empty calories, do we forget what real food tastes like?
That's the core of the worry, I think.
But we have to be careful here, right? Brain rot is subjective too. What feels like rot to me might be genuinely soothing or fun for someone else. Maybe someone dealing with anxiety just needs something simple and predictable.
Absolutely. Context is crucial. What's numbing distraction for one person might be harmless escapism or even culturally significant for another. The goal isn't judgment or shaming. It's about discernment, asking ourselves, is this feeding me or just numbing me? Is this enriching my life or just filling time? It goes back to that metaphor. Brain rot is like cotton candy at a feast. Looks appealing, sweet for a moment, but too much makes you feel sick and you're still hungry for substance. Real art, it doesn't have to be highbrow or complex. It just needs to feel honest, intentional, alive.
Okay, so this really gets to the heart of it. Is calling something brain rot just intellectual snobbery? Or is there a real tangible difference between nourishing art and empty noise?
Look, it's definitely partly opinion. Brain rot isn't a scientific category. It's colloquial, it's personal. Your threshold for what feels empty or repetitive depends on your mood, your background, your needs at that moment. No universal checklist.
So then, how do you tell the difference? If it's so subjective, how do you know if you're consuming brain rot or engaging with real art? Where's the line for you personally?
It's tricky, but maybe we can use a sort of creative litmus test. 4 questions we could ask ourselves, drawing from different ideas about art and communication. First, was it made with intention? Even a silly meme can be art if someone deliberately crafted it to make a point or evoke a feeling or play with form. Brain rot often feels mass-produced, automated, purely functional, made just to exploit a system.
Okay, intention matters. What else?
Second, does it reflect presence or autopilot? Did a real person put something of themselves into it, their perspective, their vulnerability, their curiosity? Or does it feel like it was made just to fill a slot, farm some views, break the silence? If it feels like it was made just to post something, it might lack soul.
Presence versus autopilot. Got it.
Third, is it adding something or just echoing? Does it transform its influences, offer fresh perspective, remix things in a novel way? Or does it just copy and repeat existing tropes without adding depth, maybe just for speed or scale? Does it invite you to think or just feel like a feeded carbon copy?
Ads or echoes. Okay, and the last one.
Fourth, what's the actual effect on you, the consumer? How do you feel after engaging with it? Stimulated, connected, moved, curious, or numb? Tired, empty, irritated? If you find yourself compulsively watching something but feeling worse afterwards, that's a big clue. It might be feeding an addiction, not offering insight.
So it's really a spectrum, not a simple yes-no. A goofy video could be genuine art if it hits those marks of intention, presence, effect.
Exactly. Think of it like food again. You've got nourishing meals, crafted intentional art. You get empty calories, fast, low-depth content. And then you've got spoiled or toxic stuff, deceptive, manipulative content. You can enjoy snacks sometimes. You definitely want to avoid the poison, but you thrive on the nourishing stuff. The key question isn't always, is this art? But maybe, what is this doing to me?
Which leads right to the next big one. Should people just not make brain rot content? It feels dicey telling people what they can or can't create. Artistic freedom, right? But if some of it is potentially harmful?
That's the knot, isn't it? It blends taste, ethics, freedom, and impact.
Yeah.
I think the answer has to be nuanced. It depends on the type of content. Some stuff that might feel like brain rot is just harmless escapism, play, silly meme mashups, random visual gags. If the intent is playful, everyone's in on it. Let it exist. It's like doodling in the margins. No harm done.
Okay, harmless play is fine. What else?
And then you have content that, while not malicious, encourages passive, addictive, numbing consumption. The algorithmic sludge, the anonymous mass-produced TikToks, the infinite scroll traps. This stuff isn't necessarily evil, but it does contribute to mental fatigue, cultural dilution. Creators maybe should be aware, what ecosystem am I feeding if I'm just chasing clout with this?
A question of responsibility, maybe.
Perhaps. And finally, you have content that crosses a line into being actively harmful or exploitative. Stuff that weaponizes algorithms to spread misinformation, intentionally farms outrage, promotes dangerous ideologies. Here, clear ethical boundaries apply. Creators are responsible. Platforms do have obligations. Audiences can push back.
So art is subjective, yes, but impact. That can be more objective, more measurable. Freedom to create doesn't mean freedom from critique or consequence.
Precisely. Everyone has the right to create, but that doesn't shield the creation from discussion about its effects. We can't, and shouldn't try to, ban brain rot. But we can try to build a better creative culture. For creators, maybe ask, am I expressing something real or just chasing numbers? Does this nourish or does it numb? For audiences, maybe consume with more awareness. Curate feeds actively. Support the art that feeds your soul. For platforms, maybe rethink the incentives. Reward depth, not just clicks. Make meaningful work easier to find.
So the question isn't really, should people stop making brain rot?
No, the real question is, what kind of creative ecosystem do we actually want to live in? Because if we don't actively choose, the ecosystem will be shaped by those who care least about depth and meaning.
Wow, that really shifts the focus. It brings us back to this fundamental issue. We're creative beings, but we're operating in a system, a consumer economy, that measures our creativity by visibility, by engagement. Platforms reward speed, it feels like. Capitalism colonizing the creative spirit.
It can feel that way, and it makes us forget. Humans made art long before algorithms. Cave paintings seen by maybe a few dozen people, oral traditions passed down in one village, private journals. Art existed without needing millions of views. Which really raises the question, is there still space, value for art that doesn't have to shout to be heard, that doesn't need to be bought or go viral?
And this sheer volume, this overabundance, it warps our sense of value, doesn't it? When good art gets buried by the algorithm, creators feel like failures. But maybe it wasn't failure. Maybe it was just bad timing or didn't hit the right trend keywords. We start confusing invisibility with inadequacy, and that feels like, yeah, a spiritual wound.
And it's also worth remembering, sometimes what looks like brain rot isn't just shallow content. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism. It can be a symptom of a culture under immense stress. A way to fill the silence when life feels empty or overwhelming. A simple comfort when the world feels too complex. Some content isn't creatively deep, but maybe it's emotionally necessary in its simplicity for some people, some of the time. It lets them just breathe.
So the problem isn't that simple stuff exists.
No, the problem is when the systems we use disproportionately elevate only that kind of simple, easily consumable expression, making deeper work harder to find or sustain.
It feels like there's this quiet longing underneath it all, a desire to create more humanely, to make things that matter, even if unseen, to consume things that genuinely move us, not just distract us, for art to feel more like a relationship, maybe, not just a transaction.
What's fascinating here, and what several sources touch on, is that this isn't just about aesthetics. It's become a moral conversation, a spiritual one even, about how we assign meaning, how we connect, in a world saturated with signals.
Okay, let's tackle one final, very practical question. What about sheer volume? What if someone is making, say, 1,000 songs or images every single day? Is there a hard limit? Or does it just boil down to their intention?
Technically. Is there a hard limit? Probably not anymore. With AI tools, automation, templates, yeah, one person could theoretically generate thousands of pieces daily. But that immediately begs the question, can all those pieces be intentional, emotionally resonant, distinctive? Can anyone even receive or process that volume meaningfully? Without time for reflection, for feeling, for iteration, you risk getting exhaust, not expression. The creation becomes noise, not just because of the quantity, but because of a potential disconnection between the sheer output and any real underlying meaning.
So what is the true boundary then? Is it just physical burnout or something else?
I think the real boundary, as one author eloquently put it, is spiritual, not numerical.
Yes.
Think about the energy, the presence, the intention you bring, the vibration of it, if you will. Someone meticulously making 1,000 small, curious sketches a day, fully engaged. That could be a deeply devoted practice. They're present, pouring themselves into the work.
Right.
Someone hitting generate 1,000 times on an AI tool just to flood a platform for clicks. That might be a disconnected operator just feeding a machine. The critical difference isn't the number. It's the internal posture. Are you giving something to the work or just using the work to extract external value like views or money? True creation often feels like a conversation between you, the medium, the moment. When that gets reduced to just a monologue, or worse, just a marketing funnel, something vital, maybe something sacred, gets lost.
So massive volume without a clear vision or deep presence. It leads to saturation, but without soul. Stylistically abundant, maybe, but spiritually redundant?
That's a great way to put it. It's not that any specific number is wrong. It's about a posture, a way of relating to the creative act that favors performance metrics over genuine presence.
Okay.
So maybe the question we should ask isn't how much is too much, but rather how much can I create while staying fully human, while staying truly connected to myself, to the work, to the world. That's the boundary. And it's personal, it shifts. Some days it might be one carefully crafted sentence. Some days it might be a flood of ideas. Some periods might require silence, gestation. Creation isn't a race, it's a rhythm.
Finding the tempo that honors both the craft and the soul.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. There might not be a universal ceiling on quantity, but there seems to be a sacred threshold related to presence. Not about how much you make, but how present you are while making it. When we create with that kind of reverence, that attention, the work tends to hold weight, truth, life, whether it's one precious piece or 1,000 exploratory ones.
So wrapping this all up,
Hmm.
what does this mean for you, the listener, navigating this wild world of creation and consumption?
Maybe it boils down to this. In a world absolutely flooded with noise, perhaps the most radical act is simply to create with care, and to care about what you consume and what you create, whether it reaches millions or just one person. Whether it's a huge painting, a complex song, or even a thoughtful 3-second TikTok, if it was made with presence, with intention, it's probably not brain rot. It's a little spark, a light, even if it's faint. And maybe the way forward isn't about trying to somehow stop the flood, but about choosing to be a lighthouse, patiently, consistently shining for those who are still looking, still wanting to connect, still wanting to feel something real.